welcome to this episode of Hold the Shekhinah. This podcast is here to support and guide us during this ascension journey, during our awakening, integrating, remembering, embodying of our true essence, our soul, our infinite light. I am your host. My name is Aurea. I am an ordained Magdalene priestess, a Reiki master, energy, and a sound healer. And I am your guide. And this episode, we are going to go into the current moon phase that we are going into, which is the waning moon. And we are going to talk about what the moon has to do with our incarnation. Because there's a lot of information always. Some of it not the best intentioned, others somewhat more on the right track, and still others is kind of a regurgitation of what other people have said or what other teachers have taught. And I have heard it many ways. I've heard it that the moon is a satellite and the moon basically is negative, and I've heard it that the moon is very positive and is associated with intuition. I am more of in alignment with the belief that nothing is good or bad in and of itself. It is all in how it is employed and how it is utilized. Because I guess a fundamental tenet of my belief system is that the Creator, Allah, the Divine, Mother, Father, God, Goddess, whatever we call that frequency of creation, source, consciousness, it doesn't matter the name that we call it. I am of the belief that this creator, creatrix energy that we are all a part of is actually us. So how can anything in its full authentic expression be bad? It can't. The only place where good or bad come into play would be in this physical 3D earth school that we are in. That's the only way separation comes into play. And the good bad, that is a separation. It's a separation program. So I am of the belief that in the infinite oneness that everything is, so at the point of creation from which everything stemmed, at that point, there is no duality. There is no good or bad. There is no, this is going to lead you into enlightenment and this is going to damn you into all lifetimes or whatever. There is none of that. So for me, it is my spiritual journey has led me to the point of delving into oneness, delving into unity, understanding and dissolving my own ego and my own programs and my own stuff and karmas to the point where I am beginning, I'm going to say it like this, I'm beginning to see where the intersection of everything lies. And I'm beginning to cultivate that non-judgment, that neutral perspective of everything truly being infinite consciousness, just simply expressed in a different way. So my take on the moon is a much more holistic, a much more higher perspective. And I don't like to use the word higher because it's not a hierarchy. And at the same time, the concept I'm attempting to explain, spirit guides help me, is the concept that there is our 3D perspective, and then there is the perspective of ultimate oneness, source consciousness, God, Goddess. And that is something that we as human beings, we can in moments come close to grasping, and at the same times not so much, because we are human. So part of this human experience that we are on is that not knowing. It's that forgetting that we are infinite consciousness, coming back into remembrance. And even when we do come back into remembrance, we still don't grasp the expansive, infinite nature that is this source, God, goddess, Ein Sof consciousness. So the moon. The moon is a very interesting concept to talk about for me, because if we think about it, some people say it doesn't exist. Other people say that it's the dark side of the moon is the home of bases and shadow governments and all kinds of conspiracy theories, which I think are fun. I think those are fun rabbit holes to jump down. And then there's the spiritual aspect of the moon, and that's what we are going to talk about. We're going to talk about what the moon has to do with our incarnation. So in the Aramaic spirituality and the Chokhmah traditions, the wisdom traditions that Yeshua, Mother Mary, the Essenes, Mary Magdalene followed, because they were students of this tradition, of this wisdom, this ancient Kabbalistic mystery tradition of the divine feminine. The moon represents our incarnation. Our incarnation meaning our soul incarnated in this physical body. So Saturn is going to come into play with this. So bear with me and just hop along for the ride. And let's dive in to the moon. So the moon is associated with many goddesses, with the feminine, with the mysteries, with intuition, and the moon goes through different phases. The moon has her point where she is at her fullest, and then her point where we don't even see her at the new moon. And the moon is associated with the feminine. And the moon affects us here on Earth because it's the closest celestial body to our Earth, and it affects the tides. And just as it affects the waters of the Earth with the ebb and the flow of the tides, it affects the water in our physical body. So even if we don't believe in any of this nonsense, because at this point it would be what I'm talking would be nonsense to you, you're still affected. You're just unaware of the level at which it affects you. So the moon represents your soul incarnated in the body. And your soul chose to incarnate through in Aramaic spirituality, it is said that we incarnate through Cancer, through the sign of Cancer. So Cancer is the mother sign, the divine feminine archetype embodiment, and it's that sign that births things into being, births the unseen into the seen. And women are associated with the moon because we also birth things into physical form, because we are the only beings that can gestate, that can actually conceive and gestate and give birth to life. And our soul, when we are unaware of our infinite consciousness, of our soul essence, of the fact that we are this limitless being and that our human existence is but a dream, we tend to, the soul in a way feels trapped in the physical body, the parts of your soul that are in your physical body, because the majority of it is not even incarnated. It's basically up in your mazal, which is the arc line. It's above your head. So I guess that would be the soul star chakra, would be another terminology for that. So the moon affects our physical body. It affects our mind. It affects our sleep cycles. It affects our intuition, our intuitive capability. So if you were to moonbathe, you would gain more intuition. So you would heighten your intuitive capabilities. The moon is associated with your soul incarnated. The moon also associates, let me rephrase. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied because there's a lot wanting to come through. Okay, so the moon also represents our human experience, male or female, or whatever denomination you choose to believe. All beings are affected by the moon because the moon is representative of our physical vessel. Because our physical vessel, without the light, without the soul, that spark of the divine, then there is no life. So our light, our soul, our essence isn't ours. And it's similar to the moon because the moon doesn't have a light of its own. The light of the moon is the light, the reflection that we see from the sun. So that adds another layer, and that can be very triggering to the ego, because the ego wants to think that we're the baddest and we got everything down and we know everything. The ego wants us to believe that, but that's not true, because at no point in time, no matter how intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, mentally advanced you are, at no point in time can you know all that there is to know, because it's simply there is infinite possibilities, and what we see and perceive is but a fraction. So I'm sorry to break it to our egos, but we don't know everything. We don't perceive everything necessarily in the most accurate light. And our light isn't really ours. We are part of a greater whole, a greater infinite consciousness that is in everything and everyone. And that also can be quite triggering, because we don't want to believe that people who have wronged us or people that have committed great harm have that light too. But they have to have that light, or else they wouldn't exist. Now, they may have misused their light, and then there's going to be universal laws and principles that will apply to that soul, or that aspect of that soul, once it transitions into the other realms. But that's not for us on this earth plane to know, understand, or even judge. So it really takes a lot to allow yourself to surrender your beliefs around who you are, what you're here to do, and around your own, the concept of you actually being infinite and yet not being fully in control, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So I hope I explained that correctly. So the moon goes through phases. And so again, in that aspect, the moon is also representative of not only our soul evolution, but also of our physical life. Because we go through the point where we are in the womb, we are basically but the zygote of, the cells that are replicating and expanding from the sperm and the ova. And then we start to expand, and we start to form into the blueprint. Well, we start to form in the image of the blueprint of our DNA. So we start to expand, and we go from points where we are complete, and then we go back through points where we unravel, and then we think we're not complete. We think we need something, but we really don't. And then we come back into our understanding that we really didn't need anything in the first place. So it's a spiral. It's a continuing effort and a continuing journey inwards that is what we call life. And we ebb and we flow. We go into our inward phases and we are in our outward expression. And all of these things, they change at different points in time in our lives. And particularly women, we need to really align with our womb cycles, because the moon also mirrors our moon cycles. Because the more we can align with our womb space, the more that we can connect to our own infinite creative power, our infinite ability to create and to manifest and to birth the unseen into the seen. And this comes into, so we get into creation, we get into manifestation with the moon, we get into expansion, we get into understanding the cycles, and that's very, very important, because we are in a society where we're taught not to pay attention to the cycles. We're taught to ignore all of that, when it actually has a lot to do with our human experience. Understanding our cycles can actually better prepare us and better allow us to be of support to others and to ask for support when we need it. But if we're unaware of the cycles of ourselves and others, then of course we're going to not understand, and we're basically going to feel lost and confused and frustrated, and we're going to more easily go down the rabbit holes of darkness and into those kind of feeling helpless, as opposed to feeling empowered. The purpose of spiritual practice, the purpose of honoring cycles, whether it's the cycle of the moon or the cycles of the year, all of these work together to support us in evolving, in expanding, in living our authentic, fullest expression, living our soul essence in our physical form. So the moon, right now, we as of Thursday, we are going into the waning quarter. And the waning quarter is the Razia. That's what it's called in the Aramaic teachings. And it's about the mystery and the secret and the shadow. So when the moon is new, is an excellent time for seeding intentions, because we're in the void. Infinite possibilities can go infinite ways. Then we nurture the seeds of our intentions as the moon grows fuller, until it reaches the full moon, when the moon is at its height, at its peak, and that's usually the point of completion, the high zenith of the cycle. And oftentimes what you seeded during the new moon of that particular 6 months later, what will be the full moon in the same sign, usually it takes that bit of a cycle to start seeing the effects of the seeds that you planted. Because again, everything is a cycle. We are in a society where instant gratification is what is preferred. However, everything that comes quickly is, unfortunately, in many cases, is lost quickly, because we do not have the adequate foundation to sustain what we have brought forward. And this is what spiritual practice helps us with. It helps us with creating the foundation and purifying and strengthening our physical vessel, and creating the emotional and mental and spiritual foundation for you to sustain what you are calling into being. And the moon is a very powerful tool to learn these cycles. And you may think, okay, well, I went through 5 new moons in Leo. I already know how the new moon in Leo plays out. I'm sorry to break it to you, and I've been guilty of this myself, but if we have that belief that, well, I've already done that, I already know that, then we're creating separation, number 1, and we're feeding arrogance, which is 2. And when we feed arrogance, we again create separation. So we're basically feeding the ego as opposed to approaching everything as a child with that new wonder. Because the thing is, even if we've gone through a lifetime of new moons in Leo or full moons in Sagittarius or Cancer, doesn't matter, whatever sign we think we know, we don't really know it, because there's always another layer. There's always more to explore and more to expand, because who we are 5 years into our spiritual journey, enjoying that same new moon in Capricorn, is a whole different beast, or ideally, but is a whole different kettle of fish than the person at the beginning of spiritual awakening having an experience on that new moon in Capricorn. Two completely different perspectives, two completely different lifetimes that we're trying to compare and say, oh, I already know how that goes. So I invite you to start to consider that we don't really know how it goes, and to allow yourself to go deeper within. So the full moon is a time of completion, of celebration, of illumination, of actually receiving the wisdom and seeing what needs to be seen. And as the moon is waning, going back into the new moon, so we're again losing the light of the moon, that's a time to really start introspection. And I don't know if I did an episode about the menstrual cycles and how that affects how our hormones and our mind works differently at different points in time in our cycle, and how basically it's better to learn after we ovulate than it is at the beginning. So I'm going to look into that, because I think it's really important for women in particular to know that about their cycles. And this is what it has to do with the moon. So with the moon, it's very important to know what the cycles are, because when we know what the cycle of the moon, and we know what sign it's in, then we can better work with the moon and work with the energies that are being that are being brought in to the physical plane. So the moon changes sign every 2.5 days. And then there's a period of time when the moon is void of course. And if you have one of those moon apps where it tells you when the moon is void of course, that means the moon has no influence upon it. So the moon is not being influenced by Venus or by Pisces or by Capricorn or whatever. The moon is not being influenced by anything, it's just chilling out being the moon. And I used to think, because the app is kind of a little cryptic, and the app that I have says, so don't do anything in the void of the moon, because you don't know how anything's going to happen. It's similar to all that fear mongering around the eclipse. Yes, the energies can be heightened and unpredictable during eclipses. However, we need to use our own intuition and our own judgment. And I'm glad that I learned this about the void of course in the moon. So what I learned was that when the moon has no external influence, so it doesn't have the influence of Pisces or Capricorn or whatever, the moon is just being. That means that because remember the moon represents our incarnational experience, we can actually shed and let go of karma much more easily, because the moon is associated with our physical experience, and our physical experience has to do with karma. And speaking of karma, let's bring in Saturn. Saturn is called the Lord of Karma, even though in Aramaic spirituality it is a feminine planet. But let's call the planet the Lord of Karma. And Saturn is the taskmaster, the disciplinarian, the father figure that is stern and is all about discipline and structure and getting things done. And if you don't get things done, then you're gonna be in a timeout. And Saturn can be seen, because of all these qualities, as very harsh, very restrictive. And Saturn restricts the flow of the moon. And in that, it also restricts our physical experience. Because, and I actually, this came to me while I was teaching my sound healing course, of course, my first session, and it just clicked why Saturn has to function that way. Because when we become incarnated here on this physical plane of duality, we've forgotten our infinite oneness. We've forgotten all the lifetimes. We've forgotten all of the lessons. We're basically a newborn, completely ignorant of our own power to manifest and our own power and our own responsibility. So the moon serves to remind us of the cycles, and the earth cycles serve to, again, cement this cyclical nature of life, of the ebb and the flow, the death, the rebirth, the reincarnation, the life, the death, all of it. And when we're a child, we need the discipline, we need the structure. Actually, we need this as adults too, but particularly when we are children, because children can get hurt easily. If you don't teach the child, don't touch that hot stove because you're going to get burned, the child will get burned. So Saturn, in a sense, is keeping us safe by not allowing us to be able to expand so much when we do not know our own power, when we do not have the full awareness and consciousness of our infinite nature, and we're very reckless. Because if I'm pretty sure that we've all had similar experiences of being young and reckless. So of course Saturn is reining you in to keep you from burning your hand or, setting the house on fire. So Saturn's function is to create that discipline and that structure in order to keep us safe. Now, as we expand and as we learn to flow with the cycles and to go deep into ourselves and to come into stillness and to expand and begin to understand and live our mission, our purpose, and actually just be, allow ourselves to be, and bring in even more of our soul and our light, then the restrictions begin to ease. Saturn begins to bless us with gifts and abundance and expansion and joy. Why? Because Saturn sees how responsible and how good, even though I wish there was another word, but Saturn sees how much expansion and how much growth and how responsible we've been with managing our energy, with managing our power, with manifesting our soul's essence. And so Saturn gives us more blessings. And this is why their Saturn returns. So when Saturn returns to the point in time where it was in your natal chart, so when Saturn returns to that point in time in your natal chart, it's called a Saturn return. And what happens is that if you're basically off partying and, flunking out of school and, doing all the things we're not supposed to be doing because they really do not add to our light and they do not help us shine and they don't help us embody our soul. And, they really don't add value. They really don't create value or love or harmony or peace or joy. They're just temporary, fleeting things. Then Saturn is going to give us a swift kick in the ass because, again, Saturn is that disciplinarian energy. And I know for my Saturn return, I certainly was kicked in the ass and I was forced to just take a look at my life and really see, okay, is this life that I'm living, working 80 hours a week in finance, is this really what feels good and natural to my soul? Is this what feels good? Like, look at my life. I like, sure, everything looks great, but it's not. I feel empty. I feel hollow. This cannot be what it's about. So Saturn gave me that kick in the ass to go on my soul journey and do what I needed to do to basically bring my body into health, bring myself into alignment, go back into my healing gifts and my intuitive abilities. So Saturn will do that. And the more that I have leaned into my soul's calling, the wisdom that exists within me, my gifts, my healing abilities, the more that I leaned into that, the more that I was blessed with more expansion and more abundance and more joy and more of everything that I wanted, and then even more than I even thought I would have. So it really is, it's a great blessing to be able to walk this path of a priestess and to be in service and to be sharing my gifts and to be working with the moon, because the moon, it has been one of my strongest teachers, and I've learned the deepest wisdom from the moon. So because we are in this phase, we're waning back into the last quarter, which is about the mysteries and the shadow. And not shadow in like a negative way, but like going into the depths, coming into the soul, coming into our infinite oneness. And that's the mystery that we're talking about. We're in this phase. So this waning quarter, let's take this time to align with the deepest, align with the deepest parts of ourselves. Those parts that we hide, those parts that we only show to our loved ones. Let's lean into those and see what they have to teach us. What do they have to share with us? How can we utilize this time to seek deeper wisdom and meaning and alignment, and to bring in more of our light, more of our soul? So I do want to share a couple of teachings about the Aramaic letter that created the moon, and that letter is the Tav. And the Tav is connected to the concept of free will, the power to make moral decisions, and the capacity for completion, the pursuit of the truth, and the ability to achieve wholeness. And what is this wholeness we speak of? It's that oneness. It's that coming back. It's the death and the rebirth and the cycle back into our infinite oneness. So let's take this time and this companion sound activation that I will be sharing, the companion episode to this, and let's really align with the mysteries of our soul, with our light, with our expansion, with our truth, with speaking our truth and showing up authentically. Let's take this time to really delve into the depths of the void of our soul, of our infinity, and see what is revealed to us. Because there is always deep wisdom, and if you've experienced deep wisdom, then there's deeper wisdom. There's always a deeper wisdom to access. So join me in our companion sound activation. I thank you for listening. As well as always, if you enjoy this episode, give it a thumbs up, share it, like it, comment, follow me on Instagram, say hello, so on Instagram, my personal, my Instagram, my major one is at Aurea, AUREA, LARA, or at Hold the Shekhinah. That is the this podcast. I thank you once again for joining me, and check out the sound activation. And if you want to learn about healing and expanding and transforming with sound with crystal alchemy bowls, we're still open for registration for the sound alchemy course, and you can check the link in the show notes. Have a blessed day of the goddess. Have a wonderful last quarter as we work our way into the new moon.